Well, hey everyone, my name is Nathan Jones, and if you're new here, welcome. I like to talk about all things movies, specifically Blu-rays, and welcome to my film journey, where each week I've been covering the things that I've been watching and picking up. And the last video, I just talked about all the 4K and Blu-rays that I just got recently, and I plan on watching a lot of those. But we've been on this film journey path, and this film journey path actually is coming about with this film journey wheel that I invented. So if you're new here, this is a little boutique label of a wheel that I made, and I decided to do these different little prompts here. And this last month we have been covering pick 5, but it kind of expanded into longer and more options because I wanted to watch more of these titles of these unwatched movies in my collection. All of you have been voting for the different titles to watch, and that's been really fun, and I'm going to continue to do that in a particular way. But anyway, today we land on Criterion, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to be talking about 10 titles from my unwatched pile of Criterion releases, and I'm so excited to cover them because a lot of them are classics, and I just watched them for the first time. So let's spin this. Vinegar Syndrome. Okay, we're going to be watching some very interesting titles here very soon. But yeah, so we're going to be watching 10 Vinegar Syndrome titles next week, so be sure to cover for that. But now let's jump into some Criterion titles that I watched this past week, and boy oh boy are there some good ones here. Before we jump into that, let me know some of your favorite Criterion titles and some kind of identify some of the titles that you discovered this week and also this year. I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section down below. Alright, so the first title is a release from Sean Baker, who we'll talk about here probably a little bit later. But let's talk about 2008's Prince of Broadway, which is a very interesting title. And you know, honestly, Sean Baker is just such an interesting filmmaker and a really eclectic American filmmaker, and talking about pretty much a lot of the different stories that are untold within our own system. And I think that is a really fantastic kind of path and trajectory that he's done with a lot of his stories. And I actually have not seen all of his work. I have a few things left, like Red Rocket and whatnot, but Prince of Broadway is actually one of his first films that he made. This came out in 2008, and it was kind of a DIY auteur as the Sean Baker, like I said, plunges into the world of West African immigrant Lucky, who is played by Prince Adu, and his Armenian Lebanese boss, Levon, played by Karen, it's Levon, who is played by Karen Karalugian. And this is a very interesting tale, and also just a very interesting, you know, I mentioned DIY because of the camera work, right? It almost feels like it's a non-linear story of sorts, but it's a very simple premise with our main character as he's kind of going through this world that he knows really well, and he has actually laid a kid upon his pretty much doorstep and said, hey, this is your kid, you're gonna have to deal with it, and from an ex of his, and this really kind of throws him off, and you can see it as he goes through you know, kind of his day-to-day routine, and how this kid kind of just throws that off for him, and the different people that he's interacting with, and also just himself kind of breaking down from that role, and whether or not that is his child or not. And so it's really fascinating in that regard. But like I said, Sean Baker makes a lot of really great titles that are kind of fundamental to the American experience, and especially this is also an immigrant experience, and one that, you know, 2008 wasn't that long ago. However, this feels as modern as it needs to be, and I definitely recommend people check this movie out and understand a little bit of the struggle of, you know, somebody who may or may not be in the right place at the wrong time, and something of a really fascinating character. And the behind the scenes stuff on here is really fascinating too, because this is a lot of non-actors, a lot of people he works with, and these are actually kind of based on these characters that they're playing. And so it's really fascinating to kind of see that, but the special features kind of go into that a little bit with some archival, you know, footage, and also just some more modern footage of them talking about this project as a whole. And I think our Prince Adu wasn't able to join up later in some of the latter part of the more recent stuff that's special features, but this is an incredible film. This is a movie I'd probably give a 3.5 out of 5. It's one that I think would probably require a couple of rewatches here to make it go up a little bit in my regard, but I definitely recommend people check it out, and more of Sean Baker's work. All right, so next we're moving to 1987, which I would consider to be my favorite film year, and I adore this movie just because of the amount of just layers this movie has, and I'm talking about the Hollywood Shuffle. Hollywood Shuffle is directed by Robert Townsend, and I believe this is his debut film, and this is an amazing film that, like I said, has a lot of layers to it. In fact, I would argue that the layers are, some of them escape me because I don't have this experience, nor do I understand where a lot of these different actors are coming from. But the Hollywood Shuffle is a really fascinating comedy slash, it's a really weird thing to categorize because it's definitely a satire of sorts, but it is a story of a man who is in Hollywood and trying to pretty much get his next big role and become a big thing while he is kind of going against the system, because the system itself is inherently racist and inherently kind of puts these different characters that they play into these roles that don't really represent their entirety as a people. And it is really fascinating. One, there's that dark side of it, and there's also a really comedic side of it, because a lot of the comedy comes about in the portrayals of, like, they're acting, overstimulating the things that they're kind of making fun of, and in a really, really funny way. And I really, really like this movie, and I want to watch it again just to kind of capture some of those comedic moments. But I laughed out loud a lot watching this movie, and this movie is just incredible. But like I said, he kind of looks at the typecasting of black actors in the 1980s, and then we also have these different characters, and also just the way that this film is kind of made, because it came out in the late 80s. It is filmed in a way that it jumps around quite a bit, and the types of filmmaking it wants to be. But at the same time, it's really, really fun and kind of refreshing in that way, because it's really vibrant in the sense that it's paced really, really well. And I love the way that this is shot. The different segments in here. There's even like a critics section that I was laughing the entire time of these two guys kind of just criticizing roles in their theater seats, and that is just one of my favorite bits of this entire movie. And yeah, this movie is just one that I think a lot more people need to watch. And this is a movie that has a lot more layers than what the surface brings to it, but it is a great classic, and I would argue this movie is probably a 4.5 out of 5. It's one that I keep thinking about, and I kind of want to just revisit all the time. So yeah, Hollywood Shuffle, go check this movie out. It's an incredible one. All right, so continuing down this path is a Bill Duke production, and Bill Duke, who I love in Predator, which another 1987 kind of dig there. But let's now talk about 1992's Deep Cover right here. There's Lawrence Fishburne on the cover. My God, what a beautiful cover, and what a beautiful looking movie. This movie, like I said, came out in the early 90s, 1992, and is a movie that is a kind of a modern noir, or like a 90s noir of sorts, kind of looking at the war on drugs, as we have our main character right here, kind of going undercover in this really deep cover, if you will, kind of seeing the underbelly of the city that he is in and the people that he's around. And it is so stylish. It also has Dr. Dre's, I think, debut solo single on here as well, and it's just really, really fascinating, and also just like a time capsule of when this came out, but also, it kind of explores some modern themes as well, and it is done in a really tasteful way. And I think Bill Duke's direction is incredible, and I believe this is, I want to say this is, I don't know if this is his first film that he made, but this definitely feels like somebody who is an expert in their craft, making a really, really well made and really gritty type of movie. And Lawrence Fishburne's incredible in this, and yeah, the acting in here is just one to kind of just get mesmerized with the atmosphere of what this movie looks like, and then also just get caught up in this urban kind of cityscape that this world creates. It's a really, really great film, and I definitely recommend people check it out. I'd give this movie a 4 out of 5. It's one that I think I need to watch again to kind of explore some more themes and kind of understand it, but it's got a great single in there from Dr. Dre. It also got some great performances, and yeah, it just looks beautiful. So yeah, this is an amazing Blu-ray, and I definitely recommend people check out Deep Cover. All right, so we're going to stay in the 90s. Now we're going to go to 1996 to another social class kind of warfare. And I believe Eddington I haven't seen Eddington yet, just to kind of clarify, but I believe Eddington maybe took a little bit of the premise from this movie, and I'm talking about the movie Lone Star. Now, this movie is a modern Western, kind of in the sense that we were just talking about with a modern noir, but like obviously in the 90s. But this modern Western is directed by John Sayles, and man, this is a really damning piece of American cinema, and looks at the underbelly of a town that is definitely in decay, and also just looking at the border between I guess countries, and also just seeing the social unrest that it kind of unfolds between the two. And like I said, this is very, very reminiscent of something like Eddington, that I believe is, kind of looking at a lot of modern politics, and in looking at immigration in particular. I believe Lone Star did this first, or at least did this in a way that also is really alarming and arresting for the people who are watching this movie. Now, this is a really great cast as well. There is lawman Sam Deeds, who is played by Chris Cooper. We also have Frances McDormand in here, Chris Christopherson, Clifton James, Elizabeth Pena, Ron Canada. There's just so many people in here that are just incredible pieces of work, and I just really, there's images of this movie that I really, really enjoy, and I love kind of the patchwork design of it in terms of the different stories and different perspectives that this movie kind of showcases. It's a movie that is definitely dark and gritty, unlike the cover, where it just kind of just shows you this hot Texas sun kind of bearing down on this desert town on the border. And it definitely has a place between people who abuse their power and looking at that. But anyway, there's a lot of really cool things, and I really, really love the plot of this story because it kind of turns it into a mystery of sorts. I know I mentioned a little bit of the politics side of it. The politics make a big role and splash to this movie, but the mystery in particular is really fascinating because a skeleton is discovered in the desert. Lawman Sam Deeds, who is played by Chris Cooper, who is the son of a legendary local sheriff who is actually a prick, and you're going to see a lot of flashbacks there, begins to investigate will have profound implications for both him personally and for all of Rio County, a place still reckoning with its history of racial violence. This is just an amazing film with an amazing plot and story, and also just has a lot of relevant things going on. And this looks incredible. This is a 4K release of this particular film, and so I really enjoyed that. I wasn't able to watch many of the special features, unfortunately, but I definitely recommend people check this movie out. It's a powerful one. I'd give this movie a 4 out of 5. It's definitely a hard watch in some places, but it's definitely worth watching and looking at the critique of America in a kind of a 90s context, but also looking at it and through a modern context right now. All right, so now we're going to go back in time to 1980 to a British classic, which I really thought was a lot earlier, just based on this title for some reason. But let's now talk about The Long Good Friday. Man, what an amazing gangster film, and what an amazing score. This is probably the score that is just playing consistently in my head. If I challenge any of you who are watching this right now, go look up the soundtrack for this movie and go listen to the main title, because it is just, it pops. It is so fascinating, and it's got this weird, almost giallo, and also like kind of jazzy kind of feel to it, but it weirdly fits for this movie, and I love the direction of this movie. I know I'm going all over the place, but I feel like the theme really does hit the nail on the head of what this type of movie is. It's a little jarring at first because you're watching a gangster movie, right? A really kind of hard to watch gangster movie, and I would argue this is probably one of the best British gangster films of all time. It's a movie that definitely the hype and the respect that a lot of people put behind it, I can definitely see why a lot of people talk about this movie. This is an incredible film. So we have Bob Hoskins, who is incredible in this particular role, as our main gangster, who is also a human, and definitely has a lot of flaws to himself, as he's getting embroiled and kind of this backstabby kind of behind the scenes of the alleyways, but also on the pier of London and on the river. And it is just really fascinating to kind of see all these people kind of betray each other, but at the same time in a very vicious and very human way as well, because it definitely feels like you can actually kind of relate to the characters who are going through these things that are definitely more than most of us deal with, of course. Obviously, most of us aren't gangsters, but at the same time, you get a little bit of a feel for Bob Hoskins' characters and the characters that are involved in this story. And it's just incredibly well paced. It's really, really well put together. It's, like I said, it's got that great score to it and soundtrack, and I think that's what makes it so frenetic dramatic and so engaging that this movie, despite all of, the jumping around and kind of going into the different plot points in this movie, I think it is really, really well designed. And I think that's what makes this movie kind of stand the test of time and why it's such a masterpiece. I'd give this movie a 4.5 out of 5. It's really nearing a 5 out of 5. This movie really, really impressed me. And of all the movies I've talked so far, this is probably the one that's impressed me the most out of this particular batch. But my goodness, like I said, go listen to the score. It's incredible. Go watch this movie. I haven't seen all the special features. There's a lot on here, but great 4K, looks great, fantastic movie. Long Good Friday. All right, so now let's move away from a gangster film to a Peter Sellers film that is absolutely delightful and a movie that I feel like will put a smile on anybody's face. Directed by Hal Ashby, it is Being There. Now, this is a movie that I started, I want to say a couple years ago, and I never finished, and I don't exactly know why, which is insane. Having watched this now and having watched it, kind of focused and fully engaged with the movie, my God, is this movie just a delightful charm, and it is so freaking funny. This movie has so many hilarious points in this, but also such a delightfully human and charming type of tale. But Peter Sellers' character, my goodness, Chance the Gardener, or Chauncey Gardner, is incredible. Let me just read this premise real quick. Peter Sellers plays the pure-hearted, childlike Chance, a gardener who is forced in the wilds of Washington, D.C. when his wealthy guardian dies. Shocked to discover that the real world doesn't respond to a click of a remote, which is what he is obsessed with, television, he stumbles into a celebrity after being taken under the wing of a tycoon played by Melvin Douglas, and is just fantastic in here because Chance, or Chauncey, is this lovable gardener who is really just enamored by television and kind of the world that he lived in, and also, gardening, right, for this local estate that he had worked for his entire life. And he's finally out into the real world. He's finally meeting people left and right, and under this tycoon, he actually starts meeting really, really famous people, including the President of the United States, giving advice to people, but in the most basic and funny of ways. And he is a gardener, right? So he's really kind of just giving advice about gardening. And a lot of people are like, you know what? This means something a little bit more than what he's saying. And it is done kind of deadpan and is portrayed really, really incredibly by Peter Sellers. This is just a movie that'll bring a smile to your face. There's a little bit of, some social and political commentary here, I feel like, especially if it's a Hal Ashby type of story. But man, oh man, is Peter Sellers just a delight to watch. And I just recommend people watch this movie. I don't want to give away too much of the story because it is so much fun is to be had watching this story. And I love the way this movie ends as well. And I won't get that away, but my goodness, is this just a delightful film. Honestly, the more and more I think about this movie, I would give it a 5 out of 5. This movie is just incredible, and I'm probably going to go back and watch this again and not stop it like I did the first time. But yeah, go check out Being There. This movie's incredible. All right, so now let's move to a documentary from 1976. This is actually a really illuminating story of American squalor and from wealth to squalor. You can probably guess where this is going to be going. I'm talking about the story of Grey Gardens. Now, it's an actual place where Edie and Edie Beale, mother and daughter, are staying, and they are actually cousins of Jackie Kennedy and were from this really prominent rich family, but decided to live in this Grey Gardens area. And it pretty much was a story and a house that had really rich kind of fixtures to it and really fantastic kind of stuff around it. However, they've fallen into squalor, and this is actually directed by the Maisels, and the Maisels are David and Albert, who are actually friends of these two particular women, and it really just kind of documents their everyday kind of life. And it's really fascinating because yes, there's this squalor and there's this decay that's all around them. However, they kind of make the best of it, and as much as there is some squabbling and also some kind of arguments between the two women, it's really fascinating to kind of watch them kind of enjoy themselves. And there's like a playfulness, especially to the younger Edie right here, little Edie Beale, and she is actually quite the character and is probably maybe the main fixture of this story, and kind of watching her as she's taking care of her mom, but also at the same time taking care of the house, but also just enjoying her kind of playful innocence that she is. She's almost like stuck into kind of this mental health crisis of kind of where she's a little playful, but also something's not there, something's not right. And it is a fascinating film that came out in 1976, and especially from a modern context, looking at the mental health of today and kind of seeing what this looks like. And I know there's been some controversy with the Maisels, kind of looking at whether or not they exploited the two women. I don't necessarily see that for me. I would say it's more of they're friends with them and they wanted to kind of see like this really fascinating story of where they came from and now where they're at now. And there's actually quite a bit of charm to them as they engage with each other. They really kind of go at each other's throats like a mother and daughter would, but even more insulting and engaging that you would realize. There's definitely problems between the two, but at the same time, there's some comedic parts. There's things that are really human in this movie, and there's one scene in particular where little Edie dances with a little American flag that she has, and it is just so charming and so enthralling that you are just kind of out of this story for a second and just kind of enjoying her joy of this little moment that she's having. And it is just a fascinating tale here. I also watched the Beals of Grey Gardens, which is actually an uncompressed audio soundtrack of extra features. I think it's constructed from hours of extra footage from the filmmakers' vault. It's another hour and a half long story and kind of just more conversations of the women and the things that they're going through. But yeah, this is a movie I'd recommend people check out, and it's definitely got a really interesting modern lens to it, but is a movie that I recommend for everybody. I'd give this movie a 4 out of 5, maybe a 4.5 out of 5. It's an incredible one, and one that is a really fascinating story about two women kind of living the way they want to live. All right, so now we're going to shift to another really fantastic woman. From 1970, she directed her one and only film, and I'm talking about Wanda. Now, this movie I've been wanting to watch for the longest time. This is a movie that I've had in my collection for a couple years now, especially when the BFI the Sight and Sound poll talked about their top 100 films, and Wanda had been in there for quite some time, and so this is one that was on my list of things to watch. Now, this is directed and played by Barbara Loden, who, like I said, has only made one film. Unfortunately, she passed in 1980, so only a decade after this, but this is a really fascinating tale of this woman as she's going through this town where more or less it kind of feels like maybe an post-industrial type of town where the town folk are really kind of all together and know each other's business. But she decides to kind of escape this life that she had with her husband and her kids, who she doesn't really like that much, and she kind of falls in love with this criminal who is actually holding up a bar when they first meet. But what's really fascinating is her character of Wanda is a woman kind of on the margins of society, and how she deals with all of that as she kind of just wanders through this landscape that she's in this hometown, but also just the people that she's engaging with, and kind of the way that she's kind of giving herself into a lot of these different things just to kind of get a leg up and to kind of just see where where herself is within a society. It's a movie that's really haunting because I feel like a lot of people can kind of put themselves in a shoe similar to this, or at least a part in their life where they kind of feel hopeless and helpless, and they want to just to escape and go into this other completely different world that they feel is maybe a little bit more right for them at the time. But obviously that's my own surface level kind of look to this story, because this movie has so many different layers to it, and I actually watched a lot of the special features here. I Am Wanda, an hour-long documentary by Katja Reganali featuring an interview with the director, film in 1980, that is what made this film kind of drive home to me how important this movie was, because it really does showcase what Barbara Loden wanted to do with this movie, and then also what she's done after the fact, and up until, unfortunately, her passing, and the things that she was passionate about, is really, really fascinating. I didn't mention that Barbara Loden is actually was married to Elia Kazan, who is an incredible, amazing director that has been in America for a very, very long time, and a lot of people talk about, but a lot of people don't really think about Barbara Loden that much, which is really fascinating as Wanda, and she is just incredible in this movie. Like I had mentioned, she also did a little short story in 1975, a short educational film called The Frontier Experience, about a pioneer's women struggle to survive, directed and starring by Loden. That movie is okay. It's not necessarily the best, but you can definitely see her state of mind coming after this film. To kind of best describe this movie, it kind of reminds me of something along the lines of John Cassavetes, especially in the way it's shot. It definitely feels very amateurish, and, you know, stylistically there's not much going on. However, it's kind of just showcasing the reality of what's going on in her life, and I can just kind of see herself put herself upon this character, Barbara Loden, as Wanda, and she can kind of showcase something that she's, I feel like, searching for. And whether or not she finds it is not the point. It's the journey that she goes through. And Wanda is an incredible one. I'd give this movie a 4.5 out of 5. It's an incredible one. I understand why it's in the Sight and Sound poll and in the top 100 movies of all time. It's a movie that a lot of people need to watch. This movie is an impressive gem of a story. All right, so let's jump back to Sean Baker, to a film he made last year, and he just won the Oscar for it. And I'm talking about Anora right here. And man, oh man, have I been wanting to watch this movie for the longest time. But I don't know why, but I just have been like waiting for the right time to do it. And I finally did, and I had a blast with this. Mickey Madison is incredible as Anora, as she is this woman who is a stripper slash courtesan of sorts, and she definitely works in that kind of society and that life, and is somebody who's trying to kind of jump up and kind of get into a different lifestyle of where she is right now currently. And so she actually meets a young Ivan, and Ivan who is, let's see, a Russian oligarch's wild child son, who is played by Mark Edelstein, I think is how you say his name. And he actually kind of comes across as somebody who can take her away from this life, but initially starts off as like a client, right, and eventually turns into the husband, and it kind of goes into this really batshit crazy story that is really, really fun. And surprisingly, this movie is absolutely really funny. It's, of course, a sexy movie. Of course, if we're talking about sex work in general, it's that. But also at the same time, this is livelihood. This is something that Sean Baker does really, really well, and it handles it with really, really great care, and for his actors and also just the people who are involved in this story. And like I said, there's a really fascinating kind of bend to it in terms of the type of tone it wants to make, and I really love it for that fact. And I actually have not watched the special features on here, but I'm dying to watch the special features on here because kind of seeing Sean Baker's vision of this movie is going to be really fascinating. And also just to see Mickey Madison as one of her best roles of all time, and deservingly winning all those awards that she did. She's just fantastic. She's fantastic at getting burned, if you will, in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or Scream, but she is an incredible actress on her own, and I think she's going to only get better from here. But yeah, this movie is a 4.5 out of 5. It's an incredible one. I love this homage to that story. But man, oh man, what a release right here from Criterion. I cannot wait to watch the special features of it. Has anyone seen Anora? I would love to know your thoughts on it, but this movie was incredible and definitely deserved the Oscar. And the last title I want to talk about is a movie that I decided to put at the end. It's another documentary story, and this movie is directed by Martin Scorsese, so it's kind of, I wish I watched this a little earlier. I still have a couple of Martin Scorsese films to watch, but let's now talk about The Last Waltz. right here. This is a story about the band. It came out in 1978 and has so many characters in here. Characters, they're not characters, they're all artists. There's Bob Dylan, there's Joni Mitchell, Van Morrison, the Staple Singers, Muddy Waters, Neil Young, including the band themselves. And this is actually just a concert film. It's a concert film of, you know, the band as they're getting all these different guests coming out and just having a blast. I mean, of course, I just recently watched Stop Making Sense for the first time, which obviously came out a little bit later, and definitely there was some imprints of that movie on this, or at least this movie influenced that a little bit. But Scorsese did a really fantastic job as he's going between each of these different songs, and he's actually interviewing the band and kind of just having and sharing stories with them about going through their journey and just various things that they find engaging and funny. And it's just a really kind of laid back type of story. It's a movie that, you know, you can just put on in the background, but also at the same time really engage with and just put a big smile on your face the entire time, because you're just having such a good time with the music. And because this is a concert documentary, of course, and you're just hanging out with a bunch of buddies who are just having a good time. And that's what this movie's all about. I actually can't wait to watch this movie with my friends. I feel like this plus Stop Making Sense would make an incredible night, and I would have so much fun, and there would be a lot of drinks and a lot of food, and yeah, a lot of merriment, if you will. This movie is a 5 out of 5. It's an incredible masterpiece. It's got so much joy in it, and this entire journey I've been going on has been a lot of fun, and I couldn't think of a movie to end this cycle this more deserving than this title right here. So that being said, of course, make sure to kind of comment down below some of your favorite Criterion titles, and also don't forget, I just landed on Vinegar Syndrome, and we're going to talk about 10 titles from that and a lot of unwatched movies. So I'm excited to cover those next week as we jump into the Film Journey Wheel. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a like, comment down below, share, hit the notification bell, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. I'm not jonesing around.